My family had just moved across the country for my dad's new job. We traded our sunny California home for a decrepit old house in the rainy forests of Oregon. I was only 8 years old at the time, and leaving all my friends behind was devastating. That first night, I laid awake listening to the unfamiliar creaks and groans of the ancient wooden beams, wondering how I'd ever feel at home here. The next morning, after the moving trucks were unloaded, I decided to explore our new house's secrets. I made my way up to the musty attic, cobwebs clinging to the slanted ceilings and boxes of our family's belongings stacked haphazardly. That's when I found it. An old plastic doll with faded fabric skin and lifeless glass eyes, sitting in the corner like it was waiting just for me. To an 8-year-old in a strange new place, it looked like the perfect new friend. I snuck the doll back to my room, giving it a spot of honor on my bed among the other familiar toys I had unpacked. That night, as I tried to fall asleep surrounded by boxes, I swore I heard it crying softly, a creak of rusty joints and a tiny whimper like a sad child. But I pushed it from my mind, writing it off as my imagination and the unfamiliar creaks of our new old house settling around us. Over the following days, as my family struggled to make this dark, drafty place feel like home, odd things began happening. I'd wake up to find my toys scattered across the floor, even though I clearly remembered arranging them neatly before bed. The doll seemed to shift positions while I slept, like it had been moving around my room at night. Once I could have sworn I saw something pale and plastic scurrying along the baseboard out of the corner of my eye, but when I looked, nothing was there. My parents just laughed it off whenever I told them something seemed off. They chalked it up to me feeling uneasy in the new house, but I knew better. Strange sounds started emerging from the shadows, scratching noises within the walls, tiny footsteps when I was alone. That doll's cold glass eyes always seemed to be following me no matter where I moved. I refused to go near it after that. My parents thought I had merely outgrown playing with dolls, but I knew better. Something evil dwelled within that common toy, an unholy presence bound to this home, waiting for a new vessel to possess. One night I awoke to the feeling of something frigid and plastic pressed against my cheek. I screamed in terror as I saw the doll's face inches from mine, its cracked mouth hanging open obscenely. That's when I knew I had to get rid of it. The next day, I marched up to the attic, doll in hand, and shoved it back into the corner where I had found it. I said a silent prayer that putting it back where it belonged would make the haunting stop. And it worked. The inexplicable occurrences ceased immediately. No more things going bump in the night. No more glimpses of something pale and plastic lurking at the edges of my vision. I vowed never to bring that doll out of the attic again, letting it collect dust amid the cobwebs and forgotten boxes. I'm an adult now, about to move out of my childhood home. Part of me wants to peek into that attic one last time, see if the doll remains untouched after over 20 years. But another part knows it's better to let some secrets remain undisturbed, so I'll leave that attic door closed and simply be grateful the haunting is over. Even now, decades later, I'm still not sure why it happened, why that doll seemed to trigger such supernatural occurrences. But I know what I experienced was real. Perhaps some objects are better left undisturbed, holding on to the secrets and histories of the past. All I know is that doll was evil, and as long as it remained in the attic where it belonged, the haunting passed. I'll never understand it, but I'll also never forget it. I've always been a little creeped out by dolls ever since I was a kid. There was just something unsettling about their blank stares and frozen expressions. Maybe it was an overactive imagination, but I could never shake the feeling that they were watching me. The cheapy plastic dolls from craft stores were among the worst offenders. You know, those ones that grandmas love to knit or crochet elaborate dresses for? Well, my mom received one as a gift from an elderly neighbor lady not long before she passed away. The doll had a pink and white dress. At first, my mom, who had never really outgrown her own love of dolls, was thrilled with it. She kept it sitting on the blue armchair in her bedroom, with the door always open. However, as the days went by, she started to feel uneasy about the doll too, just like me. Whenever I walked past her room, I could have sworn the doll turned its head to stare right at me. It gave me the creeps. Whenever I walked past her room, I could have sworn the doll turned its head to follow me with its glassy eyes. It wasn't subtle either. It was like its head whipped around completely. The first few times I thought I was imagining it, but it happened every single time without fail. One night I woke up thinking I heard a sound coming from my mom's room. When I went to check, the doll was sitting there with what looked like a sickening grin spread across its face. Just a frozen, eerie smile that made my skin crawl. At first, I just thought the doll's vacant stare was creepy in that way all dolls are. But as the days went by, it started to feel more unsettling. Whenever I walked past her room, I could have sworn the doll turned its head to follow me with its glassy eyes. It wasn't subtle either. It was like its head whipped around completely. The first few times I thought I was imagining it, but it happened every single time without fail. My mom noticed the same thing and it made her uncomfortable. Then one afternoon I came home from school and the doll was sitting on the couch. Not just sitting there normally, but with its arms and legs splayed out in an unnatural position, and that same disturbing grin. My mom admitted she didn't put it there. My cousin, who's not much younger than me, experienced the exact same thing with that cursed doll. She saw it in different rooms at times, with its limbs contorted and that horrifying smile. What made it even worse was feeling like the doll's expression grew more sinister and mocking with each passing day. Its blank stare seemed to curdle into a cruel sneer. I started having nightmares about it watching me, and that sneer turning into a deafening cackle as it crept towards me. My mom felt the same way about that doll too, and was too creeped out by it too. Finally, after putting up with that for far too long, my mom decided to give the doll away. I was beyond relieved when that haunting thing was gone from our house. Those grandma dolls may seem innocent, but this one was downright eerie. I never want to see one of those again after my experience. Dolls are supposed to be sweet, not sinister. The day that doll left was such a weight off my shoulders. For years after, just thinking about it would send shivers down my spine. It was easily one of the scariest, most unnerving experiences of my entire life up to that point. I've never felt so violated and haunted in my own home before. Getting rid of that doll was like exorcising an evil presence. I'm just thankful my mom took it seriously and didn't brush off our concerns. Who knows what could have happened if we kept it around any longer. Ever since I was a little girl, I've had an obsession with collecting dolls. There was just something so fascinating about their delicate porcelain features and pristine outfits. My bedroom was a museum of sorts, filled with dolls from different eras and cultures that I had acquired over the years. So when my aunt surprised me with an ornately dressed antique doll for my 16th birthday, I was absolutely elated. She had found it at an estate sale, she said, and knew it would be the perfect addition to my prized collection. With its lace-trimmed burgundy gown and intricately painted face, the doll looked like it could have stepped straight out of the Victorian era. Gingerly, I took it from the box, marveling at how heavy and solid it felt in my hands compared to the modern dolls. This was no cheap plastic figurine. It was the real deal. I spent what felt like hours carefully positioning the new doll on the highest shelf of my bookcase, angling it just right so the light would catch its glossy porcelain finish. It was the crown jewel of my collection, and I couldn't wait to show it off to my friends. Little did I know that in bringing that doll into my sanctuary, I had also invited something far more sinister to cross the threshold. I should have known something was off about that doll from the moment I saw it. At first, I just chalked it up to an unsettling feeling, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end whenever I looked at those hollow painted eyes. Maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks, but I could have sworn I saw the doll's eyes following me as I moved around the room. A shiver went down my spine and I quickly dismissed it as a trick of the light and shadows. In the nights that followed, my sleep became plagued by disturbing dreams. Visions of that doll dancing alone in my room, an unnatural grin spread across its face. I would wake up in a cold sweat, certain I could hear faint giggles echoing all around me. One morning I noticed the doll had moved positions, now sitting upright and facing my bed. "That's impossible," I murmured. Perhaps I had just accidentally bumped it getting ready for school. But a nagging sense of dread took hold. Things only grew more unsettling after that. I would return home to find the doll in completely different areas of my room, almost as if it had been roaming while I was out. Objects would inexplicably go missing, only to turn up in the doll's unyielding grip. By then, I knew something sinister dwelled within that porcelain figurine. An evil presence, watching, waiting. I didn't dare sleep with the lights off anymore. Then came the nightmares. Visions of that doll dancing alone in my room, an unnatural grin spread across its face. I would wake up in a cold sweat, certain I could hear faint childlike giggles echoing all around me. One night, I woke up gasping for air after a particularly horrific dream where the doll's painted lips had stretched wide, baring rows of razor-sharp teeth as it crept closer and closer to my bed. When my eyes finally focused in the darkness, there was the doll sitting upright directly at the foot of my bed, seemingly staring right at me. A blood-curdling scream ripped from my lungs. I scrambled backwards, kicking away my covers until my back slammed against the headboard. The doll remained motionless, a silent sentry casting judgment with its soulless eyes. My heart was thundering in my ears as I frantically fumbled to turn on my bedside lamp. As the warm light flooded the room, the doll was once again simply sitting on the shelf, unmoving and seemingly innocent. But I knew better than to trust my eyes anymore when it came to that doll. I didn't sleep a wink for the rest of that dreadful night. That terrifying night was only the beginning of my torment. No matter how many times I tried to convince myself it had just been a trick of the shadows and my overactive imagination, the doll continued to invade my subconscious with disturbing frequency. Night after night, I became a prisoner to the same twisted dream. I would be wandering through a dimly lit room that resembled my bedroom, but warped in subtle ways that made it feel off-kilter and wrong. The wallpaper seemed to breathe and shift in the flickering candlelight. My footsteps fell dead silent on the hardwood floor, as if I was the only real thing there. Then I would see it, that accursed doll sitting motionless in the corner, its eyes two deep pits of darkness. I'd try to turn and flee, but my legs would be frozen in place, a scream trapped in my throat as it began slowly rocking back and forth. A sickening groaning sound would fill the air like rusted hinges being forced open. The doll's head would lurch up with a harsh cracking noise, and that's when its lifeless eyes would snap into focus, both obsidian orbs locking directly onto me. Its mouth would then yawn open grotesquely, the bottom jaw unhinged farther than should be physically possible, as a raspy, gurgling cackle spilled out. That unholy laughter reverberated through my very bones, as if it came from the pits of hell itself. I would cry out in terror, squeezing my eyes shut as I waited for whatever tortured fate that possessed plaything had in store. But I would always wake up at that moment, shooting upright in my bed with my heart pounding like a jackhammer and sweat drenching my pajamas. Each time, the memory of what I had witnessed would slowly fade like smoke, leaving me with just a lingering sense of dread and despair. I lost count of how many times I had that same night terror. It got to the point where I became afraid to even close my eyes, worried that the doll would already be waiting for me there in that nightmarish realm it had crafted. Sleep became a luxury I could ill afford with that evil presence haunting my dreams. Then one fateful night, the nightmare took a turn. Just as the doll's decomposing jaw unhinged and the raspy cackle began, something snapped inside of me. A primal urge for self-preservation took over, and I knew in that moment I had to fight back against this malicious force that was slowly unraveling my sanity. With a guttural scream of defiance, I lurched forward and swung my arm out with every ounce of strength I could muster. My flailing hand made contact with the doll, sending it sailing across the room just as its laughter reached a fever pitch. I didn't have time to react before the sickening sound of shattering porcelain split the air. The doll exploded into 1,000 shards as it struck the wall, raining down jagged shards and fabric onto the floor below. Suddenly, the demented laughter cut off, and an eerie silence enveloped the room. I sat there gasping for air, blinking against the darkness as I slowly realized I was awake in my bed. And the doll was finally destroyed. In that moment, it felt like a great cosmic weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The evil force which had tormented me relentlessly was no more, its dark tethers severed by my instinctual actions. I caught sight of the doll's dismembered porcelain head lying before me. Once so lifelike with its painted features, it now looked like nothing more than a cracked, hollow shell. And just like that, the nightmare was finally over. I would never again have to fear what evil dwelled within the confines of that antique doll. My aunt's peculiar gift had been more trouble than it was worth, but I had survived the haunting. From that day forward, I vowed to appreciate the beauty in life's simple pleasures, and to be much more wary about accepting any more hand-me-down dolls. I never knew if my aunt had realized the doll's dark secret, or if she had simply been an unwilling pawn passing along the curse. To this day, I can't bring myself to look at porcelain dolls without feeling a shiver of dread. Whatever malevolent force took hold of that birthday present, I hope it never finds a new vessel to torment again.